Okay, in this video I'm going to show you a couple of shortcuts. And these are really mental tricks. Rarely are you going to write out the formula that goes with these, but if you can just notice a pattern here, it makes some of your math go much quicker. You can kind of vault past some of the rudimentary steps we've done before. What I'd like to do to show you this, though, is just go through our normal FOIL process so you can see what the result is, and then we can go backwards and look for the shortcut that goes with it. So if I had this first problem, notice the two I gave you here, they pretty much look the same. There's only one little difference. Now let's see what sort of effect that has in the long run. So if I look at these problems, I'm going to start this one, I'm going to do my FOIL process because it's still multiplication. So I'm going to take x times x, that's x squared. X times negative 8, that's negative 8x. 8 times x gives me positive 8x. And 8 times negative 8 gives me negative 64. Now as I look at this one, what jumps out at me is I got these two like terms that I put together, but in this case, negative 8 plus 8 gives me 0. Those things cancel out. So right here I'm left with x squared, and this is gone, and this is gone, and now I just have negative 64. And notice, you can see right here, every time you have the same number, I'll use a different color for this, every time you have the same number here and the same number here, but one of them's negative and one of them's positive, you're going to get this to occur. As long as it's just x's, just single variables we're working with, you're going to get those middle terms to cancel out. So when I see this happening, I'm basically going to do my FOIL process, but I'm just going to not do that and not do that because I know in the end they're going to cancel each other out anyway. Okay, and when we go back to factoring, we're going to call this a difference of two squares because notice x times itself, that's x squared, perfect square. 8 times itself is 64, another perfect square, and they're subtracted. So we're going to call this a difference of two squares. Now if we look down here at the next one, shoot, it looks pretty much the same. Shouldn't we get the same effect? Well, let's take a look and see. X times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x, but this time it's positive, not negative. X times 8 is 8x again, and 8 times 8 is positive 64. So you see some of the same numbers show up, but notice in this case we don't even have any negative signs. Now, every time you have one binomial here and the exact same thing you're multiplying it by, this is the pattern to look for. I still have these like terms. Okay, that part's still there. So I'm going to put those together and I get 16x. I still have 64 and I still have x squared. But notice this time they didn't cancel each other out. Those things are still there. They just combine together to make something bigger. So it's not going to look anything like this, even though it kind of appears the same at first. Now, I can't write it any better than this. What I can show you is the shortcut. This number here is always twice as big as that, and this number here is always this squared. So if you get two things that are exactly identical, you don't really have to go through the FOIL process again. You know you're going to get 8x squared, and you know you're going to get 64, and the middle term is just doubling one of those. So there's a couple of shortcuts that might help you out because these things do show up more frequently than you might think, and as you start to recognize them now, when we get into factoring later on, it's going to make your life so much simpler if you can remember where things like this and things like this came from.